Lizama Stitches. My name is Amaka. In this tutorial, you're going to be learning how to make the collar you're seeing on the screen. Now this dress is an A-line dress, but I'm going to be teaching you how to make the collar. We are going to be focusing on the collar. But if you still want me to teach you how to make the dress, let me know in the comment section. Now this is my paper. I'm going to draft on this paper, and with the paper I'm going to transfer it to the fabric. After drafting on the paper, I'm going to transfer it to the fabric. Now this is my dress, and we are going to be working with the neck circumference. Now the neck circumference of this dress is 20.5 inches. 20.5 inches. Now I'm going to divide 20.5 inches by 2, and that gives you 10 1/4. Now this is my paper. I'm going to fold my paper into 2. If you're drafting on your fabric, fold your fabric into 2. Now I've folded my paper into 2. 20.5 divided by 2 gives you 10 1/4. I'm going to add 3 inches to that 10 1/4, and that gives you 13 1/4. That gives you 13 1/4. Now I'm going to mark 13 1/4 on my paper. Remember that my paper is folded into 2. Now because my paper is on fold, my paper is folded into 2. So I'm going to divide 13 1/4 by 2. 13 1/4 divided by 2. 13 1/4 divided by 2 gives you 6.62, but I'm going to approximate it to 6 3/4. Now, on this point, I'm going to mark 4 inches. The length of my collar is 4 inches. So I'm going to mark 4 inches. Now this is 4 inches and 4 inches. And I'll connect it. Now, from this point, I'm going to come up by 1/2 inch. Now I'm going to connect this point to this point. I'm going to be introducing a slight curve. I'll connect this point to this point. To this point. Okay. I'm going to connect this point to this point. You remember that I added 3 inches. I added 3 inches here. So from this point, I'm going to mark 1 inch. From this point, I'm going to mark 1 inch. So I'll connect this point to this point. Just like this. So now I'm going to cut it. So after cutting, this is what you have. With this, I'm going to cut 4 of these, and I'm going to iron interfacing on the one I'll be using as lining. The one I'll use as lining, I'm going to iron interfacing on it because the fabric I'm using is light. But if your fabric is thick, you might not need interfacing. But if your fabric is light, you will need interfacing. So I'm going to iron interfacing on my lining. This is where it's going to be on the neck. This is where I'm going to sew to the neck. Here, I'm going to sew here with 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'll sew here with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I've ironed interfacing on my lining. Now I finally ironed interfacing on both the lining and the main fabric, because of the fabric is really light. The fabric is light. Now take note, my lining is also the same fabric. I'm using the same fabric as my lining. Now after sewing your collar with 1/2 inch, so you turn your collar this way. I'm illustrating with pin. Now you turn your collar. When you turn your collar, you still have 1/2 inch seam allowance here. Now this is how to sew your collar. Now this is what I'll do. This is how I'm going to attach my collar. I'm going to hold my collar. I'm going to sew from the, now this is right side facing the wrong side. I'm going to place it this way and I'll sew. Let me illustrate with pin. I'll sew it with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now after sewing it with 1/2 inch seam allowance this way, right side facing the wrong side, then I'm going to bring this. Now I'm going to turn it this way, right side facing right side, and I'll place it this way, and I'm going to sew. Now at this point, I'm going to sew from this point. Now I'm going to sew from here. I'm going to sew it in such a way that I'm not going to sew on top of the collar. I'll sew it in such a way that you're not going to see the thread on the collar, and you're not going to see the thread on the dress as well. The thread is going to be in between the collar and the dress. But as I'm sewing here, this part will also be sewing. I'm going to be sewing here. This part will be sewing. Now when you do this, you're going to have a neat finishing. When you sew your collar this way, you're going to have a neat finishing. So I'm going to do it and show you the outcome of it. So I'm going to fold this in. I'm going to iron this in 1/2 inch seam allowance. To make it easier for you, you can just pin it down, pin it, then you take it to your sewing machine and you sew from here. Now after sewing, you're going to turn your collar this way. This is how your collar is going to be. Sew from here and you turn your collar this way. So I'll do it and show you the finished look of this collar. Now after sewing here, I'm going to use this one. Now I'm going to do the same thing on this, and I'll use it to sew this part of the collar. This part of the collar. So I'll do it and show you the finished look of this dress. So this is my dress. I'm done sewing. Now this is it. When you look at it from here, you see that the seam is inside. Are you seeing it? It's inside. And when you turn it from here, the seam is also inside. Now what I did was I started by sewing here. After sewing here with 1/2 inch, I now held this other one and pushed the seam inside with 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I stitched it from here. As I was sewing here, this part was also sewing. So it's not good for you to hold your collar like this and hold your dress and sew it this way. When you sew it this way and you turn it this way, the seam allowance is still showing from here. If anything happens and the collar goes up, the seam allowance will be showing from here and it will be rough. So don't do your work that way. Always give your clients a perfect finishing. It's very important. So that is just it with this collar. Now this is the back. This is what it looks like. Now this is the back, and this is the front. This is the front. So this is the front. So that is just it with this tutorial. Now if you learned something from this tutorial, please give this video a thumbs up. Share this video with your friends, your colleagues, your loved ones, and also subscribe to my channel to support me. Subscription is free. Feel free to follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Lizama Stitches. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Thanks for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.